Yes, I'll introduce the films, not too long because it's a long night. So it's three, it's Total Recall, Showgirls and Starship Troopers, and they were made one after the other. So starting with Total Recall, I think it's perhaps interesting to give you a little bit of background how that happened, that whole thing. The script of Total Recall was already 10 years around. I mean, there were several directors that had tried to do it, among them Cronenberg, and they had not succeeded. Finally came into the hands of Dino De Laurentiis, the Italian-American producer, and Arnold Schwarzenegger had read that script and wanted absolutely to do that, although it was really not for him, the character, because it was a measly accountant.
Donc pour parler du premier film, Total Recall, c'est un scénario qui existait depuis une dizaine d'années. Beaucoup de metteurs en scène avaient essayé de le réaliser, dont Cronenberg, sans y parvenir. Et le scénario a fini par appartenir à Dino De Laurentiis. Schwarzenegger l'a lu. Il était déterminé à le faire, même si le personnage n'avait rien à voir avec lui, n'était pas pour lui, c'était un comptable plutôt malingre.
Et Dino De Laurentiis told Arnold that he didn't want to give him the part because he thought that he was totally wrong for the project.
Et Dino De Laurentiis a refusé de donner le scénario à Schwarzenegger en disant qu'il n'était pas le bon comédien pour le rôle.
And then he proceeded to do the movie with Bruce Beresford in Australia.
Et il l'a mis en production avec Bruce Beresford en Australie.
Just before shooting, he went bankrupt.
Juste avant le tournage, il a fait faillite.
And Arnold went to my producer that I knew very well, Mario Casar, who was the head of a smaller studio called Carolco, and said to Mario, buy me the script.
Et c'est Schwarzenegger qui est allé voir un producteur que je connaissais, Mario Casar, le patron d'un petit studio Carolco, et lui a demandé d'acheter le scénario.
And then so Mario bought the script, and then Arnold said, there was a director, I saw a movie that was Robocop, and take that director.
Et c'est Schwarzenegger qui a dit à Mario, j'ai vu un film qui s'appelle Robocop, il faut choisir ce réalisateur-là.
That's the way I got to this movie, you know. It was offered to me, this is the script, this is Arnold Schwarzenegger, take it or leave it.
Et donc on m'a dit, voilà le scénario, voilà Schwarzenegger, c'est à prendre ou à laisser.
And of course there was a problem because the script was really not for him. So but I thought that we could fix it, and I brought another writer, Gary Goldman, and we decided to make, of course, the accountant to somebody to work in construction with jackhammers and things like this, and that it would be fitting Arnold's structure.
Et donc, c'était vrai que le scénario n'était pas du tout pour lui, mais je pensais que c'était qu'on pouvait le modifier. Et j'ai fait venir un autre scénariste, Gary Goldman, et ensemble, on a transformé ce comptable en travailleur du BTP qui avait l'habitude de marteau-piqueur.
So in general, you could say that Arnold Schwarzenegger supervised the whole project, which is true. Included publicity and everything, he did all that. I mean, he's a very handy guy, and he did it in a very good way. I mean, had a great time with Arnold. And on a more serious note, what I liked about the script, of course, from the very beginning when I read it, was the ambiguity, that it was never clear if this was a dream or not. And we emphasized that as much as possible, that there would be always, throughout the whole movie, two realities, the reality of the dream, or the reality, or this is not true, and basically you're still sleeping because they implant this dream in your head, and so you're still at the factory where they do that. So that was for me, let's say, with a big word, that for me was, let's say, the first postmodern movie.
Donc, il y a une chose importante, c'est que la tête pensante de ce projet, du début jusqu'à la fin, était Schwarzenegger, qui est un type très malin, et il s'est même occupé de toute la promotion. Mais sur le fond, ce qui était intéressant, c'était l'ambiguïté, l'équivoque. C'est un film qui fonctionne sur deux plans, et on a veillé à ce que constamment ces deux réalités étaient possibles, deux nuances entre un rêve et l'histoire des implants et de quelqu'un qui a une réalité implantée dans son cerveau, et on ne doit jamais pouvoir savoir à aucun moment laquelle des deux versions est la vraie.
It's really the original ideas of Philip Dick. And let me point out, we have to move forward. Let me point out one scene that I think was for me, and is still for me, the most interesting of the whole movie. It's not all these, there's a lot of action stuff, and I think it's also well made, I think. But what is really interesting, halfway the movie, there is this guy that comes in, his name is Dr. Edgemar, and he says, I'm from the company that implanted this dream in your head, that you're a secret agent, that you're in Mars. It's all nonsense. You're dreaming. You should come back to reality. And Arnold is like, cannot believe it, of course, and then doesn't want to believe it, and the guy said, if you don't take this pill, isn't it, otherwise you will be ever into your, you will be lobotomized.
Pour moi, la scène la plus importante du film est celle où le représentant de la société qui fabrique ces implants, M. Edgemar, vient, c'est au milieu du scénario, vient dire au personnage de Schwarzenegger, voilà, il faut prendre ce cachet, tout ça, ce n'est pas vrai, c'est quelque chose qui a été implanté en vous, il faut revenir à la réalité, sinon vous serez lobotomisé.
And Arnold doesn't believe it. And what is so interesting, I mean, I hope it still works that way, of course, but then Dr. Edgemar tells Arnold exactly what's going to happen in the second part of the movie. Tells the whole story, in fact, short, but he tells all the different elements, and Arnold still doesn't believe him. And the interesting thing is that because Arnold doesn't believe, the audience doesn't believe it either. And then still, they see the movie, the rest of the movie, and it's exactly what's happening. So I thought that was such an interesting, let's say, plan to see if that would work. If I could get the audience in the same direction as Arnold, that they say, okay, what Dr. Edgemar said, that is really not true. And then basically go to another hour and everything that Dr. Edgemar said becomes true. See if that worked for an audience, you know. It worked at that time, so I hope it works tonight.
Donc la beauté de cette scène, c'est que quand Schwarzenegger refuse de croire Edgemar, il est effectivement, Edgemar lui prédit tout ce qui va se passer comme conséquence. Et Schwarzenegger continue à refuser de le croire. Et il sombre dans un état comateux, et le reste du film, qui dure 1 heure, est exactement une illustration de ce que Edgemar avait prévu. Et je pensais que c'était une expérimentation extrêmement intéressante d'essayer de mettre le public tellement aligné sur Schwarzenegger qu'il accepterait, ça a marché à l'époque, j'espère que ça marchera ce soir, de savoir par avance tout ce qui allait se passer et de rester intéressé par le film.
That's totally. And I'll try to be shorter on Showgirls because you might want to see the movies. But Showgirls was, let's say, 1.5 to 2 years later. that was a very depressing experience, in fact. There was a script by Joe Esterhaus, who had also done Basic Instinct, and we didn't. He wrote that for the same company that did Total Recall, Mario Casar's Carolco. We didn't like that script so much, and in fact, we decided not to do it. And at the same time, Carolco was working and was developing or putting on the map 2 movies simultaneously. One was The Crusades, which I would do with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the other one was Cutthroat Island, that would be done by Rennie Harlin from Finland, and with Michael Douglas and Gina Davis in the main parts. And Mario made this terrible decision, I think, that he realized that he didn't have the money for both. Both were more than $100 million. And so he didn't have $200 million, he had 100. So he decided to do Rennie Harlin's Cutthroat Island.
Donc l'histoire de Showgirls, 1 an et demi ou 2 ans plus tard, est un peu une triste histoire. C'est un scénario de Joe Esterhaus qui avait écrit Basic Instinct. C'est un scénario qui existait depuis longtemps. Nous ne l'aimions pas beaucoup. Il appartenait au même producteur, Mario Casar, qui avait 2 gros projets à l'époque. Un du réalisateur finlandais Rennie Harlin, Cutthroat Island, avec Michael Douglas et Gina Davis, et un que je devais faire avec Schwarzenegger, Les Croisades. Il a décidé, je pense que c'était une mauvaise décision, de ne pas faire les 2 films, qui n'avaient pas l'argent, c'était $100 millions chacun, il n'avait pas $200 millions. Et il a préféré le film de Rennie Harlin.
And so we didn't do Crusades. In the meantime, Mario continued with his project Cutthroat Island. That basically was more than $120 million it cost, I think. Ultimately, the movie, when it came out, Michael Douglas had realized that Rennie Harlin, who had an affair, or basically was going to marry Gina Davis, was that his part, which had been the main part of the movie, Michael Douglas, that Rennie had moved many scenes that were basically where Michael would be important had moved to Gina Davis. When Michael, who is not very stupid, he's a clever guy, had realized what was happening, you know, his part became smaller and smaller and smaller. And so Michael Douglas at the last moment decided not to do the movie. Then they made the movie anyhow, it tanked, basically it was a disaster. And again, in this case, Carolco went bankrupt.
Donc, ce qui s'est passé, c'est que Rennie Harlin, Mario Casar a décidé de faire ce film finalement à $120 millions, Cutthroat Island, avec Michael Douglas et Gina Davis, sauf que Rennie Harlin est tombé amoureux de Gina Davis, il s'est fiancé avec elle, et Michael Douglas, qui est un type très malin, a compris que son rôle était rapetissé progressivement au profit de Gina Davis. À la dernière minute, il a quitté le projet, et donc le projet a été un désastre financier, et Carolco aussi a fait faillite.
So, because Mario Casar, who is a friend of mine, had already spent a couple of $1 million on the script of Showgirls, I felt, let's say, kind of forced to do Showgirls.
Et donc Mario Casar était un ami, il allait mal, il avait dépensé $1 million, $2 millions sur le scénario de Showgirls, et je me suis senti obligé de faire Showgirls.
And we changed it a little bit, we looked a little bit at All About Eve, we added the character, which you see, the black girl, and ultimately I thought that I would be able to do it in the right way, and it would be interesting. Of course, I was very wrong.
On a un petit peu modifié le scénario, on a rajouté le personnage de la fille noire, on s'est un peu inspiré de All About Eve, et on pensait que pouvoir s'en tirer, j'avais tort.
Because the reviews of that movie were absolutely horrifying, and there was not one good word ever, and certainly not in the United States. The career of the protagonist, Elizabeth Berkley, was destroyed. My career went also into dive. It was really it was really something that, in retrospect, you would say, if you had the choice, would you do it again? I think I would say no. I'm very glad I did it, because I still like it very much as what we did. Because I had this idea, which was, again, didn't work. This idea, we did a lot of research in Vegas, Joe Strauss and me and I. And we saw that this extravagance of Vegas, I tried to put it in the movie. So the movie, I would describe the style of the movie as fully hyperbolic. The dialogues are over the top. The characters are over the top. The backgrounds, the production design, the sounds, the music. The music was made by Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics. For the big shows in Vegas, I asked them to write as much bad music as possible. So I thought that it would be interesting, because Vegas is of course completely over the top, and I thought that spreading this out over the whole movie would be wonderful. But nobody else thought that. Anyhow, I think that's probably why it was so bashed completely, and I hope you enjoy it.
Donc, d'un point de vue critique, c'est une catastrophe, pas une seule bonne critique aux États-Unis. La carrière de l'actrice principale, Elizabeth Bathory, a été brisée. La mienne a été très sérieusement endommagée. Si on me posait la question aujourd'hui, on me demanderait est-ce que tu referais ce film aujourd'hui? Probablement, je dirais non. Il n'empêche que j'aime beaucoup ce film. Qu'on a pris un parti, on a fait énormément de repérage avec Joe Eszterhas dans ce côté outré de Las Vegas, qu'on a voulu traduire en donnant à la fois des décors complètement outrés, les dialogues outrés, les costumes, tout devait être exagéré. J'ai demandé à Dave Stewart et The Eurythmics de faire la musique, je lui ai demandé de faire une musique aussi mauvaise que possible pour donner cette qualité de Las Vegas. J'espère que ça vous plaira.
Well, yeah, and I have to add, basically, the first review that was positive came from France, from Jacques Rivette. And I was very glad to read that. After all the bashing, it was wonderful to read that. So, I'm very thankful to Jacques Rivette.
Je dois vous dire, après tout ça, que la première critique bonne que j'ai reçue est venue de France. Elle était de Jacques Rivette, et je lui suis très reconnaissant.
Now, after Showgirls, there was Starship Troopers, and let me just say something about that because it gets really long. The idea, the book of the novel that we based Starship Troopers on is by Robert Heinlein. Is a very at that time was a very famous science fiction writer in the United States, I think, or England, etc. And the producer, John Davidson, who was the same producer of Robocop, had already been talking to the same writer of Robocop at Neumayer to make that to a movie, and they came to me to propose that. And we all felt that the book of Heinlein was what you would say ultra-right, militaristic, and perhaps to a certain degree fascistic. And so we didn't want to make a fascist movie, but it could have been interesting too. I mean, he succeeded, I think. Without me knowing. But we felt that we had to come to that. We thought that we would do a movie, we would keep, of course, the story of Heinlein, we would use the characters, but we would also build in, let's say, our criticism of his novel. And that you would see the movie on two levels. These people are heroes, and they are not aware of the fact that they are naive and are part of a fascist utopia. And so, and I succeeded, I thought I had succeeded to do that, but of course, again, the reviews in the United States were very, in general, pretty bad. And for example, the Wall Street Journal, seeing the movie, not by a critic, but an editorial, one of the editors of the newspaper, wrote, this movie is made by a neo-Nazi director and a neo-Nazi writer. I mean, I'm not exaggerating, huh? That's what happened.
Donc, rapidement, donc Starship Troopers est une adaptation d'un roman de Robert Heinlein du même nom. Ça a été fait par la même équipe de producteurs et de scénaristes que Robocop, qui sont venus me trouver. Et tous ensemble, on pensait que ce roman était un peu à la gloire des armées, un roman presque fasciste. Et on s'est dit qu'on devait traiter de ce sujet. Donc encore une fois, il s'agissait de faire un film qui fonctionne sur deux niveaux, qui est le niveau de ce monde fasciste et puis une critique intégrée à cette chose, en particulier sur le fait que les héros étaient vraiment des héros et mais naïfs et qui ne savaient pas qu'ils étaient intégrés et pris dans un monde fasciste. Ça a été très mal compris encore une fois par la presse. Il y a même eu un article, non pas d'un critique de cinéma, mais de la rédaction du Wall Street Journal qui a annoncé que le metteur en scène et le scénariste de ce film étaient des néo-nazis.
And of course I didn't make it easy for the critics because I used a lot of shots that were really copied from the Nazi film of René Dietrich style, Triumph of the Will. I copied some certain elements, as you will see, and that made it even worse, of course. You know, also the uniforms are inspired by German uniforms, Nazi uniforms, put it that way. Yeah. So that was too much. Yeah. I mean, yeah, too much.
Il faut dire que j'ai sérieusement aggravé mon cas en m'inspirant du Triomphe de la volonté de Leni Riefenstahl. Je me suis inspiré de très près de certains plans de ce film et les costumes sont inspirés des uniformes nazis. C'était beaucoup.
And anyhow, I think the opinion about the movie has changed a little bit in the last 20 years. That could have a little bit to do with 9/11 and other things that happened in the United States. I think people are seeing now more what we tried to do at that time, but when we did it, it didn't work.
Donc je crois qu'aujourd'hui les gens comprennent mieux depuis le 11 septembre ce qu'on a essayé de faire à l'époque, mais encore une fois à l'époque c'était mal compris.
And I wish you all a nice night, as long as you can stand it.
Un dernier mot pour remercier Paul Verhoeven de sa générosité. Merci à notre traducteur Pierre Hodgson. Et par ailleurs, 3 solutions. Si vous avez un petit coup de barre vers 2 h du matin à la moitié de Showgirls, ou si vous voulez voir Showgirls 2 fois en 24 heures, ou si vous n'aimez que les films maudits de Paul Verhoeven, Paul Verhoeven présentera Showgirls demain à 14 h au Fauvette sur l'avenue des Gobelins dans le cadre de notre festival Toute la mémoire du monde, et ça sera sa dernière intervention, cette fois la toute dernière. Cher Paul, juste un mot. Nous sommes appelés à nous revoir. Vous avez compris que la Cinémathèque française est votre maison, que vous y êtes comme chez vous, et j'espère, et notre public aussi, espère que nous nous reverrons ici très vite.
Mais ça c'est très beau ce que vous dites. Oh non, je suis très content d'être ici et de voir tellement de gens qui sont venus ici pour voir 3 films. You know, c'est formidable. I'm very happy. Thank you. Merci, monsieur.